Well, the Dallas Cowboys stink, but we don't, and neither does Window Nation. Here for another episode of Cowboys Overtime on StarTelegram.com. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel, joined by my good friend, Mr. Dallas Cowboys know-it-all, Mr. Nick Harris, who had the misfortune of watching in person the Dallas Cowboys' latest defeat, this time a really close one. In San Francisco to the 49ers, 30-24. Nick, the Dallas Cowboys now are 3-4, and it does look like to me what I see on the horizon are a lot of losses unless something dramatically changes. At Atlanta on Sunday, the Falcons are 5-3. Philadelphia at home, the Eagles are 5-2. Houston is rolling at 6-2, and one of the biggest surprises in the NFL, the Washington Commanders under quarterback Jaden Daniels are 6-2.
Yeah.
Talk me off the ledge here, Nick. Do you see any Cowboys wins in the next 4 weeks?
You would have to assume that the talent eventually steps up, right, and makes up for what has been missing over the course of the last few weeks. They're going to be getting.
Did you say talent steps up?
Yeah, there is talent on the team. There is talent on the team. I think it hasn't really come together early on. A lot of those guys have been hurt. You got guys
Who
like
are those guys?
DeMarcus Lawrence, Brandon Cooks that have, when they have been in the game, they haven't been productive, and then they have been out for the last few weeks. So maybe they get those guys back and some things can change. But at the end of the day, the personnel that they do have in front of them is their $60 million quarterback in Dak Prescott, their $34 million receiver in CeeDee Lamb, and a host of other players that have had all-pro nods and Pro Bowl nominations. And these guys haven't been able to get it done. So you would have to think that whenever those starters do come back that are hurt, if things can't get corrected, then I'm probably jumping off right with you, Mac.
So you named me the obvious ones, the guys, and he said it. You wrote about it. Dak Prescott is owned. He's got to be better.
Yeah.
Let's start it with him for a second.
Yeah.
Chris Collinsworth mentioned it. He's the NFL NBC analyst for their Sunday night telecast. He said it. I had thought it for a while. Dak Prescott looks different. And it's not the money, and he's not, something about him doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And I can't put a finger on it. When you watch him play, does he look like the same guy to you that we saw finish as a finalist for the NFL's MVP award last season? I don't see it.
Absolutely not. You look at what's around him. It's an offensive line that is definitely struggling. I think that's putting it lightly. And there hasn't really even been signs of improvement. I mean, I guess you could look at the difference between the Lions game and the 49ers game, and maybe there's some improvement there. But overall, with the whole picture of the offensive line, there has not been consistency there. It has forced him to make some errant passes. You look at the receiving core. I mean, Troy Aikman said it best, that these guys are not running good routes. They're not physical. They're not trying to get open. And so Dak Prescott's having to fit in a lot of tight window throws. But even with all of that disarray around him, he still has to be better. The first interception that he had to Kevontae Turpin down the left sideline, you could probably attribute that to a protection issue and him not having enough time to push the ball down the field. Well, push it to the left, push it out of bounds. On the second interception, that's a bad decision by Dak Prescott in minus territory. It gave the 49ers a beautiful scoring opportunity, and they took advantage of that. So Dak Prescott has to be better in these games. He can't have 9 interceptions or 8 interceptions, whatever the number is, going into week 9. It only sets this team back. And whenever Mike McCarthy is talking about, hey, we need to win the turnover battle, that's the biggest problem facing this team right now. Dak Prescott is a direct contributor of that. He has to be better in that area.
Well, you mentioned the throw to CeeDee Lamb. I'm glad you brought that up. You mentioned the throw to CeeDee Lamb that led to an interception, and it wasn't a good throw. It wasn't a good decision. It was forced. But there were some people who thought CeeDee Lamb didn't do enough to fight for it. And I think you can criticize CeeDee Lamb at points this season so far. He's earned it. I think he would even reluctantly own it. But on that play, given that throw and where it was and how CD his body was moving, I got to tell you on that one, I wasn't killing him. Now, maybe he had other points in the first 3 quarters because he erupted in the fourth.
Yeah.
That one, I'm like, no, that one feels like a reach.
Talking about that one being a reach of him making that decision, or a reach on CD's part?
A reach on criticizing CD for not fighting for that ball. Because I thought the way his body momentum was going, He couldn't have. I don't care what, unless he was a ventriloquist with his own body or a contortionist, rather, he couldn't have done it. And I thought that's dogpiling. He hasn't been good, but to rip him for that one, that felt like dogpiling.
He's not a DB. He's a receiver. His job is to catch the ball, not to knock it down. And the fact that he would even be put in a position to knock it down, you got to talk to the quarterback first,
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you talk about he's not a DB, so let's talk about the DB. Trevon Diggs, who signed a big contract extension 2 years ago, suffered a torn ACL early in the 2023 season. His back, he's starting. He has one interception this season, but ranks as one of the lowest rated defensive backs in all of pro football, according to Pro Football Focus. He didn't have another great game. He did not have a great game against San Francisco on Sunday night. After the game, he checks his phone, which a lot of these guys do a lot. And he goes on social media. Why he would go on social media after that game, I have no idea. But he did it. And he sees a tweet from WFAA sports reporter Mike Leslie, and he confronts him over it. And Mike Leslie's tweet in question was over a pass and catch to 49ers tight end George Kittle. Now, and Mike Leslie asked, what is Trevon doing here? It's a shot, no doubt about it, because if you look at the video of it, it's not good. But if you take a second, that wasn't Trevon Diggs' guy.
Yeah.
That it was Donovan Wilson's guy, and he didn't make the play. The part that looks so bad is that Trevon, even though it was his responsibility to maintain the backside so George Kittle couldn't cut back, which, okay, I get it. The visual of it was Trevon wanted no part of contact again. So he goes after Mike Leslie. He goes on Micah Parsons' podcast the next day to explain himself. And then somehow he actually managed to look worse in my mind. But this is not a guy right now who is playing good football. And in my mind, he is cratering a little bit to this pressure. I don't think he's the same guy since the injury. And I think mentally he is being worn down by the spotlight he is currently in because he's not playing very well.
Yeah, really good stuff there, Mac. I have a lot to follow up there on. We can start with that last point about you saying that he's probably not the same since his ACL injury. We asked Mike McCarthy that today in the press conference, and he said, I think that's fair, comparing how Trevon Diggs has played coming off of his injury compared to how Terrence Steele also tore his ACL, came off of that injury last year. And he said, is there probably a similar trajectory there as far as him needing to get back up to where he was? And he said, that's fair. So I think there's probably a lot that you can take away from that. Absolutely. Talking about the play specifically that Mike Leslie was criticizing, he was able to follow up on that play today, Trevon. He said, I felt like I was the last line of defense. My main job was up the field, and I was behind the safeties at the time. So, I was the last line of defense, and I felt like I prevented him from scoring. So taking that into context and trying to understand how it all went about, and then the two apologized, and they were able to kind of put aside their differences today. So I think –
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that.
And in essence, though, whenever you're getting on Twitter, and that's the first thing you're doing after a loss, and before you even take your pads off, you're going outside to confront a reporter. I was thinking about this on my flight home, and it just kind of crossed my mind. I was like, why does he care? But why does he care at the end of the day? Because whatever I tweet or you tweet or Mike Leslie tweets does not affect A, how he plays on the field, or B, his paycheck. And so me looking at who I am, I'm just like, why would he care?
And because they can't help it. I've seen it a million times. And I remember, when I was in your position covering other teams and guys, and they would all sit there and lie through their teeth and say, I don't read it, I don't watch it. It's human nature.
Yeah.
It's just human nature. You want to hear what people are saying about you. And eventually, I think anybody who's been in jobs like that, or even mine on a much, much, much smaller level, you get numb to it. You don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But if you're young, like he is, you're not there yet. And the other problem with that scenario is that even if you do make every effort not to read it or watch it or whatever, family members are doing it, friends are doing it, and they're well. You made the point. Family and friends did not alert Trevon Diggs to that tweet. And he wasn't even out of his pads. Right? You know how quick of a turnaround that was for him to go in the locker, look at social media on the phone, and walk out to where the media was standing before you all went in the locker room. That's nothing.
Less than 10 minutes after the game ended. Less than 10 minutes.
Nothing good is going to come out of that. Your defense, which is not good, just gave up 30 to an offense that is missing several key starters. You're one of the highest paid defensive players on that team. Why would you go look at it? Why don't you just take a baseball bat and hit yourself in the face 4 or 5 times? That would be more productive than going to social media right after that game.
Yeah.
And I give Trevon a lot of credit. If he came around and apologized, that's cool. That's a human nature thing to do. And I give him both, especially Trevon, credit. My question to you about that is, when you watch that play, even knowing what you know about what the defensive responsibility was it a good play on his part?
I think this is my perspective of it. Could Trevon have done more to prevent a 43-yard gain there from George Kittle? I think so, yes. I think it could have been a 30-yard gain if he had cut him off right at the sideline.
Yep.
He would have given the possibility of Kittle cutting back and Kittle scoring, but I think you take that. You take that angle and you live with that result. I think what Trevon was upset with, and he had said during that confrontation that he came out with, he was like, that's what you got from that play? That's what you got from that play? Me? And I think it was the sense that Donovan Wilson was the guy who was the guy who messed up on that play completely. I mean, he didn't even touch Kittle. He didn't even account for him coming out on that route that he ran. It was a little drag across the formation, and he was wide open. The yards of separation there were like 8. So there was so much room for him to be able to operate in space. So I think Trevon looking at that and seeing that play and how one of their safeties gave up a huge play, which the safeties are a completely different conversation right now. Donovan Wilson ended up getting pulled later in the game. And when he sees that and then he's like, that's what you got from that play, I think that's where the frustration stemmed from.
And the funny part about it is, we've killed all these different defenders on this team justifiably. And it did look like to me there was a window where the Cowboys safeties, which had been a problem for this team for the better part of a decade, really since Oklahoma Roy Williams was in maybe his 3rd or 4th year in the league after he got penalized for his horse collar tackle of Terrell Owens, which was in 2004. And he wasn't the same guy after that. He'd even tell you that. And the Cowboys really didn't have pretty good safeties. They just kept throwing Band-Aids to position. And there was a window under Dan Quinn where they got better. But now Donovan Wilson does not look good anymore. I don't know what Malik Hooker. I mean, none of them look very good. And you mentioned the safety thing. I know we're killing this guy and this guy. These safeties have not been good. And as we sit here and look about, red flags for this team and areas of concern, that's one of those that's going to be at the top of the list, and they're not going to address it because they never do.
Yeah, and you look at what they did late in that game whenever Kittle was just tearing Donovan Wilson up. They finally substitute him out for Wanye Thomas, 3rd year undrafted free agent out of Georgia Tech. And he's been proven to be a guy that they can trust in coverage, so they put him up against Kittle. And in a week when you're going up against a guy like Kyle Pitts, it might be a thought throughout the week.
All right, we've got more to talk about. Kyle Pitts in question, along with the Atlanta Falcons and your Texas A&M Aggies. But first, let's hear from our friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Thank you very much, Window Nation. Back here on Cowboys Overtime, here on StarTelegram.com. Cowboys, we knew coming into this season this was going to be an area of concern. You said a couple of weeks ago that you gave the Cowboys running game, 3 weeks to live, something like that. It's awful. They did elevate Dalvin Cook to the active roster, and in doing so, they gave Rico Dowdle the flu. I love that, to get him off the roster. But it's pretty ugly. The Cowboys running game right now ranks dead last in the NFL, 3.4 yards per carry amongst its ground game, and a total of 74.1 yards per game average. It's as bad as I can ever recall a running game for this team. I don't know if it's on a historically low pace. I would imagine that would be in the conversation. But and we can talk about offensive line and all we want. Nick, I don't see anything in that running game. And the thing that concerns me the most is that they're going to panic and reach in the first round and draft a running back in the first round rather than just get a guy in the second. I know that we got a long time to talk between here and the draft, but this running game is not about an offensive line. It's about running backs who simply just don't have the legs to do it, even if the space was there.
I'll give you a little bit of point of contention. I think it's partially offensive line.
How much? If you had to get, okay, that's good. So give me like 60-30 offensive line, it's 80-20. What do you think?
Probably like 35-65, 35%.
That's good. I think he came up with 5. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Somewhere in between there. You got to find the right entity. I think 35% offensive line, 65 running game personnel, and they just don't have a guy who can make something out of nothing. And I think that's why fans turn and look at Derrick Henry whenever he's able to make something out of nothing, and that was a guy that was available in free agency that Jerry Jones never reached out to. And there are multiple guys out there.
Nick, they didn't have the money; they couldn't do it.
Exactly. But not only with Derrick Henry, but you look at guys in the draft. You got Bucky Irving, 4th-round pick, Isaac Guerrero, 5th-round pick, Tyrone Tracy, 5th-round pick as well. These are all guys that have more yards than anybody on the Cowboys roster so far this season.
Yeah, but the Cowboys got Trey Lance for that 4th-round pick, and look what they've done with it.
Yeah,
that's just awful. Just saying that aloud.
Yeah,
they gave up a 4th-round pick and gave 1st-round quarterback money to Trey Lance. And he won't even take a snap with this team.
Hear me out. Taysom Hill roll Trey Lance.
How do they do it? I'm down. At this point, have him kick punts. Have him do something.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't think it's a bad idea. At this point, you're 3-4. It's not gone. It's not encouraging, but you are sort of casually looking down that shotgun barrel of what do I have to lose?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, did I see you tweet that earlier? I don't hate that idea.
Yeah.
The question is, would Mike McCarthy actually okay it and put in a game plan that includes a couple little gadget plays and formations for a guy who hasn't played now in a year and a half? Do you think he would do it?
That would require something that this offense has not had since Mike McCarthy has taken over: creativity. And
that's good.
Eventually it could get to a point. Yeah, but I think it could get to a point. Let's say that this thing really flies off the rails. We're looking at 5-9, 4-10, whatever down the stretch.
Yeah.
Why not get some of these guys involved, especially these guys that are on expiring deals? Hey, Trey Lance, go figure it out. Here's your Taysom Hill role. Or, hey, Awesome Richards, you haven't taken an NFL snap. Why don't you get some reps here at left guard? We'll move Tyler Smith out to left tackle. Or anything. Hey, Wanye Thomas, start at safety. Marquise Bell, start at safety. There's options for this team. They have depth guys that they can toy around with to see what their personnel looks like. Because going into an offseason where regardless, win or lose, they could win out or lose out, there's going to be a ton of turnover this offseason with all the expiring contracts, not only with the players, but also with the coaches. Why not try to figure out what you have? And I don't think they've done enough of a job of that, not only in the preseason, but here in the regular season as well. Figure out what these guys can do so that when their contracts do expire in March, you know who you want to bring back.
Totally agree. Speaking of guys coming back, we're going to talk about the guy coming back from injury, I think. The Cowboys have missed him since the win at New York against the Giants. Obviously, Tank Lawrence is not coming back anytime soon, probably the end of the month, but Micah Parsons could be. Will we see him on Sunday in Atlanta?
It didn't have a great start to the week. Missed practice today, back with a rehab group, and we didn't even see him in the media portion. It's the outlook looked a lot better this morning before practice started, and then practice started. Outlook isn't looking too great now moving further into the week. So
wow.
I'm a little surprised. I'm going to be 100% honest, Mac, and I think the team is surprised too, because you look at what they anticipated with this injury. They did not want injured reserve, which means they expected to have him back within 4 games. Atlanta's going to be that 4th game. So if he misses the Atlanta game, then this is officially going longer than what the team had anticipated when this injury first happened. And this is a really talented training staff. I say talented in the sense that they are pretty on time when it comes to their timelines, and they can make things work around it. But we've had 2 exceptions to that so far, now with Micah Parsons and with Deron Bland. So how does that shake out?
So if you had to bet on it, do you think Micah plays on Sunday?
I don't think he does. That's my bet.
If he's not going today, today's Wednesday. If he's not going today and he was supposed to and he's not, that's not a good sign. I am really surprised by that. Like, in fact, when I was putting down the topics, Nick, I was like, well, this is a given. He looked close against San Francisco. Yeah. So the natural course of thought is he's a go for the next week.
Yeah.
And this isn't, you wouldn't say setback, would you?
No, I wouldn't say setback. I think it was just a slow progressing injury. I mean, these high ankle sprains, they can be nagging. That's a tough one. I mean, when he does come back, it's going to be something he deals with the rest of the season. These high ankle sprains need 6 to 8 weeks of you being off your feet. And if that's maybe what Micah's trying to do here or what the training staff is trying to do here with him, then maybe they're just trying to get him back to 100% before he hits the field.
Okay, let's talk about this the upcoming matchup real quick before we get into the big power conference SEC schools in the state. Cowboys at Atlanta. Atlanta is a 2.5-point favorite. Now, it should be noted that when we talk about betting lines with the Cowboys, people love to bet the Cowboys.
Yeah.
They will bet with their heart, and that does influence the line. The Falcons come in with Kirk Cousins, a bit of a surprise at 5-3. They do have Michael Penix on the bench, but Kirk has played pretty well, much better than I ever thought he would. All credit to him. But I'm stunned that they're only a 2.5-point favorite. They have not blown teams out, but they're 5-3. They look like one of your standard good regular season teams that will go to the playoffs and flame out against dramatically better competition, like, say, Detroit. I don't give the Cowboys much of a chance in this one. So I'm going to take Atlanta. I'm going to take Atlanta to cover. What about you?
This is the second week in a row that I'm going to admit that I was wrong in something. And this time around, it was admitting that I was wrong when I said the Detroit and Dallas game would be a shootout. I'm going to follow.
It was. The other team didn't shoot.
Exactly. It did hit the over. You're correct. But I think this time around, it will be a shootout. There's definitely holes in this Atlanta defense that Dallas can take advantage of that other teams have in the past. But I don't think this defense can stop this Atlanta offense. I got Atlanta covering.
The one wild card in this is that he's not doing it as much. Kirk Cousins used to give you a couple plays, especially when he was in Washington. When he was in Minnesota, he didn't necessarily give you plays that were opportunities. I'm talking about bad decisions, whatever. He really reduced those. Like, you give the guy credit. He's morphed into a pretty good NFL quarterback. The thing that concerns me is Dallas didn't move the ball on Sunday night until it was too late, until San Francisco went into it too deep, keep everything in front of you. Now, they made some mistakes and they give up some chunk plays that normally you don't in that situation. Jalen Tolbert continues to just be kind of Jake Ferguson, I don't think he's really scaring anybody. I don't think we're looking at a Kyle Pitts type. This is CeeDee Lamb, and that is it. And even if they have an opportunity to make some plays, Nick, I'm not seeing anything that really tells me they can make it, that they're just quite good enough against an NFL defense. That's what concerns me.
This is another hear me out moment here, Mac.
No, go ahead.
I want you to stick with it. Kirk Cousins is the Kevin Durant of Joe Flacco's.
All right. So walk me through that one, because I was a Flacco guy. Well, no, I was a Flacco guy.
I am too.
He was really good in
big Flacco guy.
Yep. And Kevin Durant, I love Kevin Durant. I love watching him play. He's a hell of a player. And he did get a ring. Yeah. I always thought that the whole Brooklyn thing was stupid and it didn't work. He's had injuries. So I'll hear you out. I'm with you on it. So walk me through that one.
Joe Flacco being the game manager, he's not going to be your best player on the team. There's many of those quarterbacks. We got you could throw like Detroit, Matthew Stafford in that equation, maybe early Phillip Rivers, Brock Purdy. I think you could probably put in that same category at times.
Okay, I like it.
And here Kirk Cousins, and the Kevin Durant aspect being that he's not going to be the reason you win a championship, but he might make everybody around him better to get you in a position to win a championship.
So do you think Kirk Cousins could win a Super Bowl?
No, not anymore. I think he could have in Minnesota, though.
Huh. I don't know. The thing I didn't like about him was he never scared me.
And he
in NFL, Brock Purdy, I thought, could make a play downfield a couple times too, and especially with his feet, that I thought, he could do that. He was just a little bit beyond the typical boring white guy game manager type.
Yeah.
Flacco could go deep on you and make some big time throws. Cousins just never scared me.
Yeah,
and he's good enough to beat you in the regular season. He'll like you said, he'll game manage it pretty good, especially now. But he just never made that throw that I was like, wow, where did that come from? Now he's made some big the game they had a Thursday night game earlier this year. He was good.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this guy? But I like that. I like that logic. I like that. That's a fun comparison. And I really like that you stuck with all white guys. That's great. Just these boring white quarterbacks. Yeah. All right, last topic we're going to go with. We have just a monster matchup 1 month from now, if it holds true. On Saturday night, a few days ago in College Station, Texas A&M exercised a whole bunch of demons by beating LSU and killing LSU. So right now, Texas A&M is 5-0 and in first place in the SEC and 7-1 overall. They've won 6 in a row, having lost their season opener against Notre Dame. I think they'd like to have that one back. The Aggies are 10th. UT, Texas, is 7-1 and 3-1 in conference. UT has games remaining against Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky. A&M has games remaining at South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, before they both face each other.
Yeah.
Do you think both teams will win out to set up what will be the most expensive game in the history of college football regular season ticket prices?
This is going to be 10-1 versus 10-1 collision.
I like it.
Collision course on full go. I think the winner of this game goes to the SEC championship. Who I think would win that game? I think if they played tomorrow, I think it would be A&M. But I think if you take what Texas has been at their best this season and compare it with what A&M has been at their best this season, and if they can find both of those qualities before that Week 14 matchup or whatever it is, I think Texas has the edge there. But I think Texas needs to be healthy. Texas just has to get healthy.
Well, then of the games that I mentioned for A&M, South Carolina, New Mexico State to throw away, and Auburn, which of those two opponents is the one that you said they can get them?
I will say New Mexico State walked into Auburn a couple years ago and beat them by 23. I will say
that would be great. I would love it if New Mexico State went in there and won by like 6 or something. That'd be fantastic.
I would say at South Carolina.
I'm telling you, South Carolina can give A&M a game.
I'll tell you what, Dylan Stewart, one of the best young pass rushers in the country for South Carolina, athletic, freaky. I think he's going to have a day against that Texas A&M offensive line, but I still like A&M in that game.
How about UT? They've got Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky. Any of them?
At Arkansas is never tough for this Texas team, and that's proven all the way back to the Southwest Conference days. So I would
never not difficult.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would say Arkansas.
So you've got Arkansas with a maybe against Texas and South Carolina with a maybe against A&M. The South of the two, I give South Carolina a puncher's chance. I don't know what A&M is going to do about its quarterback position. You had Connor Wegman. They put him on the bench. They brought in Marcel Reed, and he ran all over LSU and flipped that entire game. I'll be really interested to see what Mike Elko does with that situation because you've got a guy that you can trust, but he wasn't making plays against this younger guy who's probably going to make a mistake or two. But he looked more like the kind of quarterback that their offensive coordinator Colin Klein was and wants. And I think they're probably going to ride with him the rest of the way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it could be a Marcel Reed situation. What the question I have is whenever they want to push the ball downfield, do they trust Marcel or do they trust Connor a little bit more? And I think if the answer is Connor, then that window is still open.
I don't. Connor wasn't making those plays. He wasn't. He wasn't. Again, I know also LSU's got a good defense, but he was not making those plays. And he's a guy you trust, but I don't know. That's a definite gamble there. And I think if you in college you'll see rotations. Let's go with this guy. Let's go with this guy. Let's go with this guy. But I think we definitely saw the way that offense ran with Marcel Reed. Mm-hmm. That's the guy the offensive coordinator wants.
Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say was if they beat South Carolina, I think Connor Wegman's career at A&M is basically done.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And one thing about Connor Wickman, I've covered him since he was a sophomore in high school. Whenever he gets hurt and he comes back, the rest of the season, he is not the same. This has now happened 3 times during the entirety of his football career.
That's too bad.
Happened once in high school, and now it's happened twice here in college at A&M. He got hurt early in the season. We haven't quite seen the same Connor Wickman since.
All right, that's a lot of good stuff, Nick. Great work as always. All right, Cowboys at Falcons at noon on Sunday. Nick will be there. I will not be. Make sure you go to the Varsity for great burgers and get the orange freeze there at the Varsity in Atlanta. All right, for all your Cowboys coverage needs, check us out at StarTelegram.com. Thank you, Candy Bolden, for producing as always. Thank you, Window Nation. We will see you next week.